Good afternoon, god eftermiddag alla medlemmar i Nya Utrikespolitiska Samfundet i Finland. Tonight, or today, let me say so, this afternoon we are going to debate the presidential elections in the United States next week. And this will go on in English, as you have been informed. And I have two gentlemen with me, one here in the studio and one in far away in Geneva, in Switzerland. Let me first introduce Mr. Markku Ruotsila, adjunct professor in Tampere and Helsinki, and a man who has written and specialized in US affairs, mainly the right-wing part of the political spectrum, the Christian movement and all this. And I must say that he is also one of the few who predicted the victory of Mr. Trump, or President Trump, in the 2016 elections. And we will see later on if he can predict the outcome of these elections too, but that's another story. And in Geneva, an old friend of New Foreign Policy Society, Charles Adam, Ambassador Charles Adam, is now in international arbitration as he was before. He was functioned as Obama nominated and Congress-approved ambassador to Finland, which took an abrupt end with the election of President Trump in 2016. Welcome back. You have appeared once before in this society. So let me start by asking you, both of you, a question. I suppose that both of you were looking at the second and last debate between Mr. Biden and President Trump last week. What is your impression? Did it change the game in some way, or did you make any special observations with anything, so to say, which was new to you or you were surprised by? We will start with Professor Ruotsila.
Well, I think that it changed very few minds. Most Americans have decided what they're going to vote a long time ago. There may be some people who were swayed slightly by Joe Biden's promise to transition away from oil. From oil,
yes. Okay.
The fracking controversy might have changed someone's mind, but very few people, I think. By this time, everyone has their opinion on both of those two men. They have been around for a long time, and half of America is firmly set. About half of America is firmly set on one, and the other half on the other one.
Charles, what do you think?
I agree entirely with Professor Ruotsila. First of all, let me say, Pär, that I am grateful to you for having organized and sponsored this conversation. I wish I were there physically with you in Helsinki, but it's nice to feel oneself back among friends. So I agree that this debate changed no minds at all on one side or the other. It was actually pretty much of a non-event. The only thing remarkable about it is that President Trump refrained from behaving in a manner which a lot of people thought was inappropriate in the first debate. And given the fact that President Trump has been saying for months about Joe Biden that he is senile and incapable, the fact that Joe Biden, in fact, was articulate, coherent, and entirely plausible. But in the main, this, as I say, was a non-event and changed no minds at all.
Thank you. Let's go to the opinion polls. Are they, in your opinion, science, or are they just good guessing? You remember that in 2016 they were not very exact, and the outcome was a surprise to many. Now there's the prediction is that Mr. Biden has a 6%, 8% lead, sometimes differing from the different polls. But on the other side, there are signs also that President Trump is making a headway in some of the important states like Florida and some other. So what do you think about these opinion polls this time? Markku?
I think we should be very, very careful in believing any of these opinion polls. The sample size is usually very, very small. The most of the time, pollsters and the media seem to be calculating the average between different polls, which multiplies the margin of error, even among polls that most of which have 600 people been asked their opinion in a country of how many millions. So we should be very careful about believing them. You can see some basic trends, but the specific numbers of the...
And what is the basic trends in your opinion?
I think the basic trend is that the race is tightening, as was to be expected in almost evenly divided country.
Charles, what do you think about? Is it a clear-cut race already, or you can see the outcome?
The basic trend that is reflected in the polling data is by and large favorable to Joe Biden. I will say, though, that as to polling generally, I don't view it as very much predictive of the actual outcome. Much more reliable, and what I actually pay much closer attention to, are the Las Vegas bookmaker odds, because there are people who bet lots of money on the outcome of the election, not only at the presidential level, but Senate races as well. And the betting odds over the years have proven themselves to be much more predictive of the outcome than generally random polls. And I can tell you that as of this moment in time, the Las Vegas bookmakers have Joe Biden as a 65-35 favorite to win the election. And those odds are unlikely, in my view, to be moving downward. And to the contrary, with every passing day between now and next Tuesday, are likely to go up in Joe Biden's favor.
And bookmakers never lose; so they always earn on the betting,
provided that their assessment is correct.
Exactly. In the invitation to this webinar, we have branded you, Charles, as a true Democrat, a true blue Democrat. That's no doubt, because you have been working for the former president and the next Democratic president. And Markku Ruotsila here is branded as the only Republican in Finland. What do you think about that? Do you agree with that? Suomen Kuvalehti once said that can you be a Republican in Finland?
Well, of course, I'm not a Republican. I cannot join that party. I cannot speak for that party. If I could, I would join that party. In that sense, I would be a Republican. However, I'm not the only one in Finland by any means.
So, Charles, you have been working. You had another candidate, but you had to join in with your party, and now you are supporting Biden. Could you comment on that? What have you been doing for get him elected?
Well, my activity has been throughout, and ever since I joined the Biden campaign after the withdrawal of Mayor Pete Buttigieg, has been concentrated on fundraising on behalf of the Democratic National Committee and on behalf of the Biden Victory Fund in the community of some 8 million Americans living overseas. And the response has been extremely encouraging. The American community abroad is mobilized to an extent that I have not previously seen for this election. And I and other expatriate Americans not only have voted or will be voting, but also have been prepared to make the effort of supporting the campaign in financial terms throughout the entirety of the events that are now unfolding.
This mobilizing of people, we will get probably a record participation in the election. Does it speak in favor of Trump or Biden? And what would you say?
Well, it's very difficult to say. Normally, under normal circumstances, it would benefit the Democrats. But as we have seen for the last 4+ years, nothing is normal anymore. The entire Trump phenomena is not normal. So there is an unknown number of people who are silent or shy Trump supporters. We don't know how many there are. In the last elections, there were studies that suggested there were every fifth person who voted for Trump had not told the pollsters that they were going to vote for Trump, or even their family members, because it is still even this year, even after 4 years of Trump, it is still controversial in many communities to openly support him.
Let's now move to the more complicated questions. I'm not going to ask you who is going to win, because everybody has an opinion and we cannot be. But let's see, let's suppose that Biden wins, but the Senate stays Republican majority, in which is quite possible outcome. And many observers say that the American system is stuck. The polarization is so difficult, so deep, that the system doesn't function anymore. How would you comment that claim? Charles, what do you say?
I think that's absolutely accurate. The worst possible outcome in terms of progress and the mobilization of the political system generally would be for a divided government, as between the White House and the Senate. I think it is almost more important for the Democratic Party that it regain control of the majority in the Senate, hopefully in support of the action of an incoming Biden administration. But we really have to get beyond the paralysis that has afflicted the United States over the past 4 years, that I entirely agree with Professor Ruotsila has been abnormal and aberrational.
Well, it didn't just happen in the last 4 years. It also happened under Obama, and partially under George W. Bush as well. But I agree that is the most important thing, that whoever the president is going to be also has the Congress, because otherwise very little will happen. I mean, there are many important things that should be tackled in the United States, and divided government makes that very, very difficult. If Biden wins the election, of course, he, like Trump now, has the option of ruling to some degree through presidential decrees and executive orders, can do something that way. But it's always better to do legislative change.
But is it better that the winner takes all? Would that help the system to function better?
Yeah, I think the system would function better. Of course, then in that case, there would be, assuming that it is the Democrats who control both the White House and the Congress, there would be a very radical change from the last 4 years.
And that would it mean deeper polarization then?
It would.
So let's, Charles, please.
Curiously, the system has been paralyzed in this administration when the Republicans actually have been in control both of the White House and of the United States Senate. And notwithstanding important elements of what had been advertised as the program of this administration, notably the replacement of Obamacare by some entirely different program, simply has not come about. So that plainly it is not a sufficient condition that the same party control both the White House and the Senate. There needs to be also a coherent approach to governance.
Let's also briefly think about the other alternative, that Trump wins his mandate is renewed, and the Senate and the House of Representatives stay in the Democratic hands. How would that influence we can only, do you have any imagination enough to predict how President Trump would act in that situation?
Not really, but I can predict how the Democrats would act in that situation. There would be more investigation, another impeachment trial. Nothing would be done legislatively. It would be a complete impasse.
I agree with Markku. Again, the perpetuation of paralysis, not a desirable outcome.
That's right. And what we can see is that we have heard so many, let's say, guesses that will happen if, as Markku Ruotsila said here, if the outcome, the result is very even. And we will have a period of long, let's say, waiting for the final result, if it is in the courts or not. Isn't that another sign of let's say, that the American system is not functioning, and the world is suffering from that also to a certain extent? Can you foresee any real chance for let's say, a repair of that system, a reform of the present system, which doesn't, it's a 200 years old and it doesn't seem really to function well or serving well the interests of the nation and the world? Charles.
If I may say so, the uncertainty and the concern that presently exists with respect to the permanence or the stability of the outcome of the election is largely a function of the doubt and discredit that President Trump has been endeavoring to throw on the entire electoral process. The alleged fraudulence of mail-in ballots, the unreliability of the counting of the votes, all of this suggests an unwillingness on the part of the incumbent to accept the outcome of the forthcoming election. The healthiest thing, in my view, for the political process generally and for the country as a whole would be a veritable democratic tsunami next Tuesday that would leave no particle of doubt in anyone's mind as to the expression of the will of the American people.
Well, can I respond to that as the so-called Republican here? Joe Biden has been campaigning as a moderate, centrist, very nice figure, which he is, all of those things. But the majority of the party is not the Democratic Party. The activists of that party are not any of those things anymore. Gallup studies have shown that since 2018, 57% of Democrats have supported a socialist system rather than a free market system. And you look at the Democratic Party platform, it is very radical by historical American standards. And Biden is running away from that official platform. And the danger, therefore, is that he is elected with votes of people who know nothing about that radical plans that very last section of the party, including the party platform, have. And there will be a rude awakening soon after the election when the Biden administration, in that case, starts to implement this policy, and there will be a counter-reaction.
Now we are getting into the ideology. So, Charles, what would you respond to this?
I think I would have to say that those aspects of the Democratic Party platform that have been referred to just now actually have been implemented in most advanced industrialized nations around the world, and in particular in Europe, and still more particularly in the Nordic countries over the last half century. It is the United States that has been laggard and backward. And it is the United States which absolutely needs a dose of progressivism in the years to come. So that I am among those democratic activists who welcome the prospect of enhanced socially democratic programs that will bring the United States forward to the place that it should have occupied over the last 5 decades and more.
And you have written about all those Americans which have a different opinion. And I remember reading what you have is that it was Obama's policy who built the platform for Trump. Is that platform of right-wing, different right-wing movements, the Christian, different groupings of evangelicals, and well, you have been specializing in that. Is that the reason why you are saying that the Americans wouldn't stand the Biden revolution, as you try to call it here? We don't see, Europeans don't see a revolution in those things, as Charles explained,
no, exactly.
but some Americans see. Why is it so?
Yeah, exactly. By European standards, there's nothing radical about the Biden agenda or the Democratic Party agenda. But almost half of Americans see that as very, very radical, and they are afraid that they will lose everything that they have valued. And then there will be a counter. There will be a reaction.
What do you think is in the forefront now? What values? Which values? Is it the guns, or is it the abortion, or is it the religion in general? What?
It's always about guns, but I think most of all it is about freedom of religion at this moment. The freedom to believe what you want to believe and talk about it and act on it and try to convert others without the fear of being punished for it, like the Little Sisters of the Poor, the monastic order that was prosecuted under the Obama administration and won in the Supreme Court, but because they refused to fund abortion or contraception under the Obamacare abortion mandate, well, Biden has promised to prosecute them again. This is just one example of half America in the middle, small town America, rural America. They fear, they really fear that they will lose everything. The ability to live the life that they have always lived, their Christian lives. Mm-hmm. This is a very, very real sense, and therefore the Christian right is very active in these elections. It doesn't show in the mainstream media, but there is a very, very massive operation.
Charles, is freedom of religion in danger when Biden is elected?
Not remotely. Not remotely. It is President Trump who has been talking in dystopian terms about all of the parade of horribles that supposedly would ensue upon the election of Joe Biden to the presidency, including the destruction of the American life and the disappearance of fundamental values of American society. All of this, I regret very much to say, is complete nonsense. And in point of fact, one of the enduring mysteries to me has been the extent to which the evangelical community in the United States has been prepared to embrace this Faustian bargain with Trump, who is surely the most ungodly figure that could be imagined by evangelicals or anyone else. So I think that the idea of the danger to the American way of life is propaganda that has been invented by Fox News and propagated by President Trump. And in point of fact, the good people of the heartland in Nebraska, Kansas, and in other red states are going to find that their lives, like those of their countrymen, will be enhanced in relation to the chaos that has been experienced over the last 4 years.
You have made research in that field. How come that many of these true Christians, if I may say so, have accepted the lifestyle of President Trump, which, at least from our point of view, doesn't seem very, very, very Christian or high moral?
Well, you can say whatever you want to say about Trump's past. compare that to Trump's present. Trump's present lifestyle is a different thing, but that is not even the point, because evangelical Christians are not, in elections, they are not voting for a religious leader. They are voting for a political leader. They are voting for a leader who does the things they want the president to do. And this is something that I find it always difficult to understand how especially Finnish Lutherans don't understand this, because at the core of Lutheran social doctrine is the idea of the two regiments. The church has its functions and the government has its functions. And among the chief functions of the government is to protect religious freedom, the right, provide the preconditions for religious freedom to exist. And this is, I maintain, on the basis of not just this book, but I have written a number of books about this religion in the United States and the Christian right, that this is what matters to evangelicals and conservative Catholics in the United States, the results.
The curious thing is that what we have learned from the history book, that United States was founded as a secular state, where there was freedom of religion, but it didn't happen really. It became a rather, how would I say, religious state from the beginning, even if it was proclaimed as secular. So we are a little bit how do you understand it, Charles, that religion has come to play such a central role in American politics?
Per, I have to tell you, it's a mystery to me as well. The United States is a nation that is thoroughly imbued with religiosity. And this is not something as to which one takes a value-driven position. It is neither a good thing or a bad thing. It simply is an observable fact. And it is the reason why it is, to me, inconceivable or difficult to understand that any God-fearing American could feel that there were some kind of a threat to the exercise of religious freedom. This is indeed a fundamental tenet of American society, always has been, and very likely always will be, to a degree that is unfathomable to most Europeans. So this is not something that is at risk in this election, not by a long shot. And it is true that the role of religiosity and of the evangelical community in American life has been deservedly fundamental and will continue to be.
Let's look at these central questions, which are now giving the headlines, creating the headlines of the election campaign. It's on, let's say, Trump's side, it is abortion, guns, whatever belongs to that sector. And we have on the other side the Obamacare, the future of the health system, and what else? What would you say could be the most decisive question? Who will finally, turn the vote into one direction or another? What do you think in which question is the most dynamite, so to say? What do you think is moving really the voters in one or another direction?
Well, I think COVID, the crisis, is a major issue, and that is something that hurts Trump significantly. How much that will prompt voters who never voted before to vote against him, difficult to say, but it is very clear that absolute majority, about 60 or 70% of Americans do not trust Trump on
his handling of
the crisis, and that clearly is a major issue. But on the other hand, I go back to religious freedom. For the other half of America, the heartland America, rural America, small town America, that is the issue. this is something that you don't, again, get to hear from mainstream media, but there is Christian media. I think it was yesterday, there was a massive demonstration in Washington, D.C., Let Us Pray demonstration, and there have been others like this for months now. There are massive campaigns on because the faith community, the conservative, evangelical and Catholic community really do feel a sense of existential threat.
Is that section of the voters stronger this time or weaker? You think that they have mobilized more for Trump now?
They have mobilized more. The organizations.
There are different signs in that. Some say that some are disappointed, some are more satisfied with Jerusalem and things like that. Charles, what do you say? Is it COVID also in your case?
No. This is not the overriding issue. To me, and I'm now speaking as an American who lives out in the world, the fundamental issue is the fact that the President of the United States is the symbolic incarnation of the nation and the spirit of the American people. And I am truly sorry to have to say that I do not regard the person of the incumbent as somebody whom I wish to reflect what I believe to be the spirit of the American people. Just as a human being, this is not a specimen that I admire or that I respect. And I find it difficult to imagine that anyone truly could, just again as a human being. And so I look forward to having as President of the United States somebody as to whom there is no doubt as to the empathy, the compassion, the sincerity, the adherence to truth, and simply being a good person. It will be a relief. And I believe that there are wide tranches of Republicans who are going to be pulling a lever for Joe Biden next Tuesday, simply because they too want to look to the occupant of the White House as being the incarnation of the spirit of the country that we have been in the past and look forward to being again in the near future.
Would you like to comment on that, on Trump's personality also?
Yeah, I personally have never been a fan of Trump's personality or the way he does things, and half the time the way he speaks. I'm not interested in that. And interestingly enough, neither are the evangelicals, who 81% of them voted for him last time, despite all of that. And 83% plan to vote for him this time. More than 90% are satisfied with him. Because, if this was an election about personalities, which one of these two candidates is the nicer, more normal, more civilized, it would be very clear that Biden would win convincingly. But it is not
issues, yes. Let's slowly move to another sector, the international affairs, and how America would be seen if, let's first start with if Trump is re-elected. How would it affect the picture of United States in the international sphere? I have my own opinions there, of course, as most people have in Europe. But let's hear what you think. Would he continue on the same line, or some people, of course, expect that he would be a little bit more moderate, perhaps in the next period, because he doesn't have to fight for re-election anymore? Would he? Is that probable, or is his character not allowing such a moderation?
Well, that's a very good question. Historically, of course, second-term presidents have tried to be more moderate and more unifying figures. It happened with Reagan, who was, most people forget, was much less popular before his re-election than Trump has been. And Reagan changed his approach in many ways, especially in super power Cold War policy at that time. Trump might, if he's re-elected, do the same thing, but everything about Trump is unpredictable.
Yes. Charles?
I think there's a clear and present danger, actually, that Trump, if re-elected, would simply career still further down the unhinged path that has been his vis-a-vis America and its role in the world. The last 4 years have been catastrophic in terms of the Atlantic relationship, the relationship of America to its traditional friends and allies in Europe. And it is going to take a long time to repair that damage. The prospect of having the damage done even more devastatingly in an onward Trump administration is one that I find myself very frightening indeed. And I earnestly hope that we don't have an opportunity to find out. The mission of the next administration is going to be to repair that which has been destroyed, and to go forward in the positive reinforcement of relationships that have existed for America in the world at large ever since the end of the Second World War. It is imperative and it is a priority.
So the prediction is that we could expect more of the same, probably with Trump. He will change his major line on NATO, China, European Union, Russia, whatever. I have seen no such, let's say, predictions that there will be a major change in those questions. So about Biden, what changes would you foresee in Biden in the foreign policy field? Would he negate everything what Trump has decided, or would there be? The prediction is that the policy on China would be almost the same, but is there other fields?
Yes, I think the China policy would be pretty much the same, except for the style and the way of doing things. That would be the first change that you could see everywhere in U.S. foreign relations. And certainly, as the ambassador says, the damage that has been done to the mutual understanding between the United States and its traditional European allies, that would be alleviated to some extent. But even there, I mean, as a European, looking at these things, I have to say that Europe just isn't that important to the United States anymore, whoever the president is, compared to what it was in the Cold War. China is more important, and that will always be reflected in the relationship, whether it's President Trump or President Biden or was President Obama.
Going back to Trump, some have predicted that there could be a more dangerous phase if Trump is going further on the line of challenging China, and mistakes could happen. What do you think? This was hard to say. Charles?
It's something that I would prefer not even to contemplate. Again, I think that the danger would be extreme, that foreign policy be conducted in a manner that is simply incompatible with what has been the history and the custom and the practice of the United States over the last 2 centuries. And we simply cannot afford that. What the Biden administration will do is, number one, rejoin the Paris Climate Accords. Number two, restore the nuclear agreement with Iran that has kept Europe and the US safe from the development of an Iranian nuclear device. Third, there will be a reinforcement of those tenets of the Atlantic relationship that have been frayed over the past 4 years. These are all fundamental. As to China, the fact is that Trump's tariff wars have been absolutely devastating to the American economy and to the American consumer and to the American soybean farmer in particular. And yes, this is a rivalry. It's a competitive world out there. The United States has in China a formidable rival. Europe has in China a formidable rival. And that is a competition which will go forward peacefully and in accordance with well thought out strategic policies. But there will not be a perpetuation of the rather haphazard approach to tariffs that have characterized the Trump administration, because that has proven itself to be counterproductive.
One special question here, as you have been specializing in the evangelical and Christian opinions in US, I don't think it is obvious that it will happen, but Biden as a president, he would revoke Jerusalem as the decision to have Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. Would that cause a big uproar? I don't think Biden will do it, but it may happen.
I also doubt whether Biden would do that, but certainly U.S. relations with Israel would not be as cozy and close as they have been under Trump, and that is certainly something that the evangelical community would not approve of. But they don't approve of Biden anyway.
So it doesn't change the game, so to say. What do you think, Charles? How would Biden deal with the dictators of the world, so to say, with the Saudi coming king and with others, with Erdogan in Turkey and Putin in Russia?
It's my hope and expectation that American foreign policy will deal with regimes that are inimical to human rights, that are hostile to human rights, in the manner in which they deserve to be dealt with, which is to say, with the expression of strong support for the democratic ideals of freedom of speech and of freedom generally. It has been an unfortunate aspect of the current administration that the ties of the president himself in personal terms have been strongest with the collection of dictators and tyrants and strongmen whom he plainly admires and is drawn to as a model for what he would wish to be or to become or to have the opportunity to create. And that too is one of the frightening stakes in the forthcoming election that I very much hope will be laid to rest.
As a former ambassador to Finland, you know how much we appreciate comments on Finnish-Russian relations, our eastern neighbor. And we are, of course, very keen to know how Biden would deal with Mr. Putin. It's more interesting for us than how he would deal with the North Korean, the small guy, or what the little guy, or what he called it. Trump called him.
Rocket Man is what he called him.
Yes,
actually.
That's right.
This is before they fell in love.
Yes. How would you think that Biden would he go to Moscow, or would he invite Putin to come to Washington?
I expect that the relationship in personal terms would not be as chummy as it has been between the respective presidents over the last 4 years. I would hope that the relationship of the United States with Russia would go forward along the lines of constructive engagement and cooperation in addressing issues of mutual interest and concern.
What is the reason why Trump has been so negative to the European Union? Is there anything deeper in behind the ideology, or is it just a competition issue, so to say? Trade issue, competition issue, or?
Well, it's both. It's clearly a trade issue. I mean, at the very core of Trump's worldview is this maximizing of profit, previously for his company, now for the United States. He has this sort of mercantilistic sense of the world order, where if one party benefits, it's away from the other party. But more significantly, it's about worldviews, especially if you look at I'd say the majority of Republicans, certainly their voters, they don't approve of a strong federal government in the United States, and they certainly don't approve of the EU. They don't approve of any international organizations, because all of that goes against personal freedom, economic freedom, religious freedom. And there's also a religious element in that, because the majority of evangelicals are premillennialists. The EU, the UN, Before that, the League of Nations, all these secular world organizations are understood in end times context.
So we shouldn't. We are speaking now about the deep Republican tradition, so to say. But it leads me to ask you another follow-up question. Can the Republican Party be reconstructed, so to say, if Trump is not re-elected and the Republicans have to find a new tune, so to say? Or will they stay in the Trump field? Can they, let's say, go further on and renew themselves with younger, more moderate Republicans perhaps coming up? Or are they stuck, so to say?
Well, this is a difficult question, because if Trump loses the elections, he won't disappear.
No.
He's still going to be very active in public life and in the Republican Party. And he has a very large following. He has brought so many new people into the party. And this has been a problem that the Republican Party has had for some time. They don't have enough supporters to win national elections. So Trump has brought in more voters, new voters, and the party is dependent on those voters.
And the money?
The money?
Yeah, he has not been able to raise that much money this time.
Oh, right, for his re-election campaign, not as much as Biden.
They've actually raised more money from Republicans than ever before in any election in history. It's simply that the Democrats have been mobilized to break all absolute records in the matter of fundraising over the past number of months. It's been an absolutely extraordinary performance. My own view is that the Republican Party is going to have to reinvent itself entirely, because the traditional Republican Party of Rockefeller and of moderate republicanism is extinct. And it's going to be a very, very interesting process to see how this plays out. Personally, I would be skeptical that in the event of a resounding defeat, Mr. Trump remains an active figure on the American political scene. As he is fond of saying, we'll see what happens. But a defeat, and particularly a defeat of tsunami proportions, which is not out of the question in the coming week, I think is going to end Trumpism and is going to require of the Republican Party a thoroughgoing re-examination and reinvention.
Actually, when you are saying that he would still play a big role in the political sphere, it goes against his own definition. He will be branded as a loser. And this is a term which he has used many times of people who doesn't, so it's talk about his own TV channel, yes. But I mean, there will also be a long row of court affairs. He is used to that. His tax information will be released. And that will, of course, debate also. Can you see it all works in his favor? I mean, he's losing and he's still keeping,
Yeah, yes.
You believe that he can survive?
Yes, with his core support group, yes. Those new people that he has attracted to the Republican Party. Then there's the traditional Republican Party that has not been keen on him at any point. The Republican Party's dilemma is how to merge those two communities while at the same time build for a longer term majority, which would include Latinos, a significant number of Latinos who are conservative on family values or moral issues, and similarly African Americans. So it's a very difficult thing to do.
But also the Democrats believe in that the demographic change will work in their favor. So you have it both sides.
On the short term, it will work in the Democrats' favor. But I don't think that it will in the long term, because Latinos are very conservative on moral issues and increasingly on economic issues. And what you see when scholars look at these things, what you see is that the first and second generation of Latino immigrants are in the Democratic Party and they're Catholic, but then they switch into the Protestant faith and into the Republican Party in the third and fourth generation.
Right.
There's been some speculation that in the event of a resounding defeat, President Trump would resign at some point between next Tuesday and January 20, which is the day of inauguration of the incoming administration, and that he then be pardoned by President Pence. The only thing wrong with that scenario is that a pardon, a presidential pardon, extends only to federal crimes. And there are a number of investigations ongoing in respect of financial and tax activities or evasions of President Trump, which are being conducted at the state level, particularly in the state of New York, which are beyond the reach of the pardon authority of any president. So there too, I think that private citizen Trump may have some preoccupations other than reality shows on television.
If I can say that I seem to remember very clearly that the Democrats last time and this time around too have been complaining about Trump threatening to prosecute his political enemies. Well, what has been done to Trump for the last 4 years and now is going to be done to Trump after he leaves the presidency, if he leaves the presidency this year, is exactly that. Just the hypocrisy in talking about these things is astonishing.
Well, these are simply matters that are in the private domain, matters that have been suspended actually during the course of this presidency because the president has been immune in effect from inquiry into activities before his ascent to the presidency. These will presumably carry on if valid and if meritorious. And if there's no beef there, then the ex-president will have nothing to be concerned about. I think.
Okay, let's stop it here on that personal Trump. Of course, he will have some star values also as a loser, but nevertheless, he will be a very disputed person. That's quite clear. I'm more interested when we are coming closer to the end here. That what is the future of United States? Let's say that we have the situation is locked. In all the scenarios we mentioned in the beginning, one president and another Congress, and so vice versa. We can have a very bad situation also. What do you think about this speculation or rumors, or partly that President Biden would nominate one or two more judges to the Supreme Court? That is one of the speculation in order to if not neutralize, at least make it more even, the outcomes of the Supreme Court, because the minority in the Congress will try to push as many issues as possible to the courts in order to gain from the composition of the Supreme Court, which now is very strongly enhanced in the conservatives. The second is that, if I may add one another speculation, because the very population-wise very small states of Northwest United States have a very strong position in the political system of the United States. States like Montana and South Dakota and whatever they are. Would President Biden push through that Washington, D.C. would become a state, Puerto Rico would become a state, even the Virgin Islands could become a state, in order to try to eliminate that huge weight of a few very very small states, which are, I mean, the difference between California and some of these states, and New York on some of these states is from our point of view quite not very democratic, so to say. I mean, it's a federation. We know the United States is a federation.
Yeah, I think that is even in the Democratic Party platform, statehood for the District of Columbia and Puerto Rico. So that might well be done. Court packing, I'm afraid that might also be done. Which would? Why
are you afraid?
Because that would cause a massive constitutional crisis. The other half of America, who felt throughout the 8 years of Obama that they had been denied full citizenship in the United States, that it was no longer their country, would feel that again in a much more acute sense. And I keep returning to this idea of a counter-reaction, but that would elicit a massive counter-reaction.
Would it be more unconstitutional than what was now done, that just before an election you nominated your own candidate, even if you know that?
Yeah. Well, there was nothing unconstitutional about nominating a Supreme Court justice when there was a vacancy on the Supreme Court.
I understand it's not unconstitutional to pack the court with a few more. It's not.
It hasn't been done, but the Constitution doesn't specifically say that you can't do it. But it would still cause a massive problem.
Charles.
What Joe Biden has said is that in the event that he is elected, he will convene a commission on a bipartisan basis to examine the possibility of various kinds of reform of a judiciary, a federal judiciary, which has created concern on a number of grounds over the last several years. He has previously said that he is not in favor of so-called court packing, which is to say an expansion of the number of justices from the current 9 to 11 or 13. I share former Vice President Biden's reluctance in that regard, but there is within the Democratic Party a certain amount of appetite, not to say enthusiasm, for the exercise of raw political power, if such power comes into the hands of the party, by way of not retaliation, shall we say, but simply giving the other side a taste of what has been its own medicine in the last 4 years.
Well, the Republican Party has never engaged in court packing, so...
Well, that's the situation, and we are coming to the end of this debate. We can only draw the conclusion that we are wiser next week. We will not be able to predict the outcome. There are different opinions. I could quote from one of the many observers that the key point is that we are required to show a little bit of humility in calling the election now, because there still can be surprises. We have seen so many surprises in the election campaign, and nothing can be sure before the vote is counted. So here says Gillian Tett in the Financial Times that really has so much rested on a vote, and really have I felt so weary of making overall predictions, even if it seems clear how those farmers might vote. She was referring to one of the groups, the farmers. And there are many groups who are divided. And if you would like to say three or few words in the end, please, you are welcome. Who is going to win? If you want, you can say it.
No, it's too close to call. That is my position.
Charles, what do you think?
I will predict a victory of Joe Biden in the presidential election and a return of the Senate to a Democratic majority, and would suggest that next Tuesday night, actually Wednesday morning in Finland, everybody keep an eye on the state of Florida, which will be the first to announce its returns within an hour after the closing of the polls in Florida. And if Joe Biden carries Florida, then it is pretty much game, set, and match. So
Thank you,
Florida,
Charles. With those words, I think we are finished, and I thank all those who have listened in and looked at our small performance here, and especially thanks to Charles down there in Geneva, and say hello to friends there. And
Indeed.
to Markku Ruotsila here for contributing and giving his special views on his research. Thank you very much, and we close here. Tack så mycket till alla lyssnare.
Thank you very much.